Hello and welcome to the Rogue Monkey podcast. My name is Kevin Pickard and I'm the host of the show that delivers you with a little bit of inspiration to help you on your journey. And today I'm joined by a very inspirational lady in Cath Pendleton. Now, Cath is more affectionately known as the Merthyr Mermaid and has had a documentary made about her of the same name. And it's an incredible story of somebody who takes on a huge challenge of heading out to Antarctica and the journey through becoming a cold water swimmer into ice swimming and through to swimming a whole mile in Antarctica in just a swimsuit. So it's a really interesting conversation. I can't wait to get into it with you. Don't forget to hit subscribe however you're joining us today. And I hope at the end of today's conversation, you're able to follow up and watch the documentary, follow Cath on socials and see what she's up to. But without further ado, we're going to get straight into it and our latest conversation on the Rogue Monkey podcast with Cath Pendleton. Hello, Cath, and welcome to the podcast. How are we doing today?
I'm good, Kevin. Hello, thanks for having me on.
I'm buzzing. I know it's been a little while since we first connected, but having sat in the room and listened to your amazing story at the Do Lectures, which I'm sure we'll come on to later, I was like, we have to have a conversation on the podcast at some point. But do you want to give our listeners and viewers just a little bit of an introduction as to who you are and a little bit about your journey?
Yeah, so I'm Cath Pendleton. I'm 53 years old. I've always loved swimming since a child. So I was really lucky they built a swimming pool on the side of my school when I was 4 years old. So the community, I grew up in a small village called Bridge in South Wales. And the coaches there were really keen to get everybody swimming. So I swam probably every day after school. And then did the normal route of going to swim clubs, started at Bridge. And then when you got a little bit better, you could go to Brecon. Did that until about 11, then gave up, tried to go back at 13. But swimming has always just been in my blood. And so I used to swim in the river all the time as a young child. So I think river swimming and outdoor swimming is just something that I've always loved. And I got back into open water swimming, funny enough, through doing triathlons. And then fell back in love with open water swimming, hurt my back, ditched my wetsuit, and then became what's known as a cold swimmer, ice swimmer, winter swimmer. I don't know. There's so many names for it. Just somebody that swims all year round without a wetsuit. And then went on to swim the English Channel, which was a dream of mine. I did that in a relay and solo in 2018. And then the biggest thing that I'm known for is the documentary that the BBC made called The Merthyr Mermaid, which documented my swim in Antarctica where I swam a mile.
Well, there's plenty of threads for me to pull on there, but I'm curious to go back a little bit because having spent plenty of time in South Wales, certainly during the winter, it's not the warmest. So let's talk, they had that back injury and, the wetsuit got ditched, and talk us through that first experience of getting in proper cold water without a wetsuit, because I think people really struggle to appreciate they get in, say, a normal swimming pool that's 29 or 30 degrees and go, oh, cold water, it's like 20. And it's like, not in the winter, it's not.
No, I know. Well, actually, it's really funny. So I'd seen this advert for the winter swimming gala, told my friend Rachel. We used to swim at Brecon on a Friday night with Brecon Triathlon Club. So one Friday night, we decided we were going to go and try this, ditch our wetsuits and go. Don't try this at home. We did it. It was nearly dark, so we left the lights on and we decided that we would just do widths of the river. Now, I remember it being 12 degrees Celsius and we swam for about 8 minutes. We got out and we were frozen. We were still shivering like half an hour later when we got to the pool, and they were like, what we've been doing. We told them that we were training. This was late September, for a kilometre. At the Chill Swim Gala in the February, and they were like, you're crazy. So I didn't really know what to think on that first time. I went again and I don't know, I just loved it, but I couldn't put my finger on it, what I loved about it. And, there's so much evidence now about how it helps people's mental health. People used to ask me and I was like, I don't know, I just do it. But it wasn't until I stopped doing it that I realized how much I loved it. So, not to go off on a tangent, but that's why I'm one to bang on about this myth that's out there about how long you can swim in the water. It's absolute rubbish. You've got to listen to your body. I think if I'd listened to that myth and stayed in for longer than 8 minutes on that first swim, I probably wouldn't be here telling the story now. So Yeah, you've got to be really prepared for that first dip. But luckily now there's so many places that you can go where they've got organised swims. There's so many coaches that can talk you through it and not wing it and be lucky like I was.
Well, it's something that, it has exploded. And, whenever I go to any of the coastal visits on surf trips or whatever it is, especially on the weekends, on either a Saturday or a Sunday morning, you see the groups getting in all through the year for their morning dips. And I think that benefit, not just from the physical point of view, but from that mental health point of view, is huge. There's, again, tons of science around, not just from a swimming point of view, but cold water in general. You've seen an explosion in people getting ice baths, or in your garden, from what I saw in the documentary, a full-scale chest freezer.
Yeah.
But let's talk a little bit then about that journey from that first dip of going, 8 minutes in and thinking, there's something in this, through to kind of where it ended up.
Yeah, the journey from that first dip was just crazy. So I was absolutely hooked. So myself and Rachel were going, and then we got another friend, Ross, to come with us, who hated it, and she still hates it. She still does it. But back then, I've got to tell you this story because this is how it really exploded to as much as it was. So us three were training for the 1 kilometre, but the rivers were all flooded that year. It didn't stop raining and the sea was too warm. And I can't remember what qualifying swim you had to do. I think you had to do 500 metres under 6 degrees to qualify for the 1K. Well, we couldn't find anywhere that was that cold because the sea was too warm. So I put a post on Facebook. There was one swimming group then. Can you imagine? One swimming group called South Wales Outdoor Swimming. And I was like, does anybody know where we could swim, where, it's not a river, it's not the sea? 2 weeks that post was on there before I got a message in my inbox from a lady called Vicky. And she messaged me and she was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe there's other people doing this, cold swimming, because I love it. I've been doing it for 2 years. So we then became the four of us. We called ourselves the Dippy Dragons, and we went every weekend. I was working in Cardiff full time at the time. So I wrote to all the lakes around the Cardiff area asking if we could swim in their lakes. And most people said no. One big hotel said yes, as long as we had somebody spotting us. Well, we were like, nobody's going to get up at 6 o'clock in the morning to watch us for swimming. So eventually Canada Lake Lodge gave in and they said we could swim there, and we signed a bit of a waiver, and we used to go 2 mornings a week, head torches and little lights in our tow floats. And the four of us become absolutely hooked. And then Vicky made the mistake of telling me about an ice mile. So for the listeners that don't know, an ice mile is under the International Ice Swimming Association rules. It's swimming 1 mile in water under 5 degrees under channel rules. So standard swimming costume, hat and goggles. So I was like, oh my gosh, I need to do that. I was hooked. I loved it. So Vicky and I became obsessed then. We were going to do this ice mile. So I actually ended up doing my first ice mile in Keeper's Pond, in the January 2015, I ditched my wetsuit. January 2016, I did my first ice mile in Keeper's Pond and became the first Welsh woman to do one. So that was amazing. And then we went to the gala that we'd all been training for, and remember being really disappointed because the water was 7 degrees. But after that, I just couldn't get enough of it. The Dippy Dragons then in 2017 went to Poland and swam for the first time in an event where the water swim area was cut out of ice on this frozen lake. And it was just amazing. And at that event, I did a 1K and a 750 in the same day. And that's where I met Jay Kennedy, who was the gentleman that arranged a trip to Antarctica. Then in the March of 2017, he put a post out on Facebook saying that they were going to Antarctica in 2020 and, show your expression of interest. And straight away I was like, oh my gosh, I need to go. So luckily for me, because I'd done that swim in Poland, he knew that, if I kept training, I could do it. And he really did believe in me, but obviously I had no money to go. So I then, in 2016, I decided I was going to swim the channel because I didn't know what I was going to do through the summer, because I didn't really like it when the water got warm. I was just diving down, playing mermaids, looking for golf balls. So that became my focus through the summer. And then so my channel was booked for 2018, September. In December 2017, I'd been banging on Facebook that nobody was sponsoring me. And a friend that I'd done a run with a number of years ago, a 10-mile run, she said, look, stop moaning. It's Christmas. People will sponsor you after Christmas. she phoned me at 5:30 the next morning and said, I've got a brilliant idea. I'm going to ask my boss if we could sponsor you for the channel. I was like, really? So, I went and I got really lucky. A company in Penarth, the local company, Source Insurance, sponsored me for the English Channel. But whilst I was there, I was banging on about Antarctica. So, everything that happened was this happened, that happened, that happened. But I was swimming like 5-6 times a week. I just couldn't get enough there. And, so I successfully swam the English Channel, went back to Source Insurance, and they agreed that they would sponsor me for Antarctica. But whilst I was there on that visit, they said, look, we sponsored you for the English Channel, but we didn't really get any bang for our buck. So we want you to do, some mental health stuff with the company and some talks and stuff. So go and meet with our marketing lady and we'll get a structure of, how we can promote you and how it can benefit us. And Joanna, that I went for a cup of coffee with, happened to be married to James, who worked for the BBC, who had this idea that he wanted to make a series of documentaries, filming extraordinary people doing extraordinary things. And he had to then persuade the BBC to follow me because they were like, well, who is Cath Pendleton? What is ice swimming? And then something else happened. I luckily got a place to go to the World Champs. I mean, that would never happen now because I'm so slow. I wouldn't even qualify. So I got to go to the World Champs in Russia, came back with a bronze in my age group because it wasn't popular then, it just wasn't. Still, it's mine. I have it. And you talk about the ice freezer, but the ice freezer is actually what sold it to the BBC. They were like, it was the July 2019. And they were like, if she's crazy enough to sit in an ice freezer, then, we'll do it. We'll do it. And in between that time, I'd been really lucky as well and got extra sponsorship that covered the whole of my swim from Young Seafood, from a chance meeting with a school friend that set me up with an appointment. I always say I was so lucky, but then other people say, well, you find your own luck. I still can't believe it happened. 5 years on, I'm like absolutely brassic now. I can't even afford to go on a swim holiday. And I'm like, all that happened and I got to do all those wonderful things. Unfortunately, COVID put a crash on me doing any more of the I-7s because my sponsorship fell aside and stuff. But, it's something that I'll always treasure because I was going to go whatever, but I'd still be here paying the debt off for it now if I hadn't had those chance things. But I think the BBC, James did a wonderful job on, the documentary. And I still can't believe my journey, really, from flicking through a magazine and seeing this advert to being in Antarctica and having a documentary that sat on the BBC for 5 years on iPlayer now. Yeah.
Well, let's talk a little bit about that because I do like this. You make your own luck. I feel like good people, doing good things, generally the world does line things up for you. And it might be 100 doors that you need to knock on before the right one opens. But I'm curious again, like we're very fortunate on this show. We've had like well over 100 guests now, and you're with the third person I've spoken to that's been to Antarctica. So we've had the BBC producer who was behind the search for the Shackleton lost boat. That was discovered a couple of years ago, but the documentary came out last year on Disney. We had her on, and then had somebody who worked for the Scott Polar Institute, again, has been out on a lot of research studies. I think to kind of explore that a little bit, I think people go, well, it's Antarctica, almost like they're talking about going to Los Angeles or Miami or Australia, and actually don't fully appreciate not just the scale of getting there, but how hard it is, the windows to get there and all of those sorts of things. And these are people that are going to stand in a nice, warm, thick, woolly coat and stand on the ice or on a boat and look at it, not get in the water. So can you just take us through a little bit of that from the expression of interest of going, yeah, I'd quite like to go, to actually the boat pulling away and going, this is now happening. Talk us through that.
So it wasn't really till the December before we went that I knew we were going, because the BBC had finally decided that James could go, but there wasn't room on the boat. But COVID had hit. Some countries couldn't go on the trips. We only knew in the December, now we were going in the February, that James was coming. James and I became really good friends, and I just remember the journey there. I left Wales, went to Heathrow. I remember being so nervous at the airport. but it was, I think, 6 days or something before we even got on the boat. So we had to fly to Buenos Aires. Then we flew down then to Ushuaia on a very small plane. We were lucky enough that we got two swims there, one in the Beagle Channel and another one at a private hotel. And I was really pleased about that because I was thinking it's going to be like 10 days from when I leave from doing my last ice mile to getting in the water and swimming. And I was so nervous about if I could do it because I'd swum a K at 0 a couple of times and I'd done a couple of 2-3 degrees ice miles, but 0 is something else. So I remember then we were in Ushuaia for 2 or 3 days. Then we got on the boat. And actually, I got that wrong. It was 6 days at sea we were before we finally got to where I swam. But I was so lucky because on the boat, it was just a normal expedition boat. There was 88 passengers on this boat. And then when they did the safety briefing, the other passengers found out that 16 of those people on the boat were actually there for swimming. They were like, what? They're like, what sort of boat have we come on? It was a shame in that I couldn't enjoy those first 6 days because I was just so worried, so focused on the swim. And we had 2 test swims, so they had to prove to the boat that we were going to be safe. Nothing bad was going to happen because basically that would ruin the trip for everybody. So after a couple of days, 5 of us got to do a test swim of 500 meters. So they just dropped us off and we swam back to the boat. I think they just wanted to see how we were after that 500 meters before they were going to let us swim longer. And then there was another opportunity that I had. There was 3 of us did an ice mile on the trip. I think 4 or 5 did a kilometer and the rest did up to 500 meters, whatever their goal was. And on the day that they had their test swim, it was in amongst these icebergs. And I got to swim around this most beautiful iceberg with a guy called Reddy and Jay. And that day, I can't explain. The colours of the water was just absolutely amazing. And then I think it was 2 days later that my swim went, which in itself was so stressful because people were saying to me, can you do it in 30 minutes? Because we don't want anybody in the water under 30 minutes. And one of the other guys, Paul, I think he did it in like 22 or 23 minutes or something. And I was like, there's no way that I can swim a mile in 30 minutes. The lowest I'd got down to in keepers was 31. But I could average anything between 31 and 38, depending on conditions. So that pressure was just immense. But luckily, a good friend of mine, Jane, on the boat, she talked me through it all. I was petrified I was going to get eaten by a leopard seal because for the 2 years that I'd banged on about it, everybody that I said to in work, the first thing they did was pull up a picture of a leopard seal and say, do you know a leopard seal killed the diver? And then on the other shoulder, I had Jane, who loves seals, going, that leopard seal only attacked that diver because it went into their space and it was stressed and then they're not going to touch you. And what it was actually on the day that changed my swim was a huge pod of orcas. But I hadn't really thought about orcas. I think I just live in cuckoo land. Do you know what I mean? And I said to James, if I'd seen those and actually realised, I said, I don't think I could have done the swim. And James believed in me so much. He was like, Kath, you would have just kissed them on the nose and carried on. But I think my swim in the end was luckily. So Jay Kennedy didn't get to swim on that day because you have to do a blood pressure test on the morning. Because obviously when you get in cold water, your blood pressure spikes. So your blood pressure needs to be low enough before you can even go in. And all 3 of us failed the medical first thing, which is like that sort of white coat syndrome, isn't it? So it became a thing then of, well, whose ever blood pressure comes down first goes first. So that's how I got to go first, which again, we talk about all these things happen. Jay had obviously planned to go to Antarctica and try and get a Guinness World Record for the most southerly ice mile. Unfortunately, he had to pull out because he'd had a chest infection and he was just like, I don't feel up to it. And, all these other people had their swim. So it came down to Paul and I then, whose blood pressure came down first, and mine came down first. So, it was, so I actually went to Antarctica, A, because I'd seen Jay's post, B, Jamie Monaghan, who is an absolute phenomenal swimmer. She holds the record for the Ice Sevens, which is swimming an ice mile in each continent. and she's the Queen of Manhattan. I don't know how many times I think she swam around Manhattan like 5 times in one go. And she swam in Antarctica in 2018 and did a mile there. And when she was swimming, the sea was flat calm, just like a lake, and there was like icebergs floating about. And when she was swimming in a video, you got penguins going along behind her like dolphins. So like once I'd seen that video, for me, I was like, I just want a video like Jamie. But yeah, so then I got to go there, and then I came back and, you know, had a record. But that's a story for another time. The fight to get that record was a bit of a nightmare, but I got it in the end. And it wasn't the reason that I went for it. But I think if something's meant to be, it's meant to be. So I fought hard to get it.
Well, let's talk a little bit about then that journey back, because you talked about the stress and the journey down. And, you know, we've had so many athletes on here who have talked about whether it's a lead up to a competition or an Olympic Games or World Championships, you know, whatever their big challenges they're working towards. And they are very process driven and focused and up to it. Talk us through, you crossed the you know, the metaphorical line, if you like, got back in the dinghy, and it's done. What happens at that point? You know, most athletes we've had on, especially talking coming back from, say, an Olympics, is like you kind of go, oh, you know, it's almost crept up on you. So when you'd actually done it and you'd finished it and hadn't been eaten by a leopard seal and, you know, kissed a few killer whales on the nose, what happened after that?
Well, now I'm not an athlete. I find that word really difficult because people say, what did you do for training and what did you do for eating? I don't remember training for Antarctica because I was just swimming all the time because I loved it. So I didn't think of training. Eating, I did nothing different. I mean, I was like, anyway, I got back onto the boat and my goal was really, I kind of knew inside that I could do it because before I went, I was doing a nice mile a week in training up in the pond. And I swear that Keeper's Pond sometimes is colder than Antarctica. So inside me, I knew I could do it. And I absolutely loved it on the day. I was absolutely fueled with adrenaline. I don't remember being cold, nothing. I just remember my shoulders hurting about halfway. And I was thinking, oh, God, this is a long way, you know? And then I was thinking, Kath, be quiet. You swam the channel. It took you hours. You know, you've got like maximum 20 minutes to go. Get your head down and keep swimming. So when I was just relieved that I was able to get back on that dinghy and that I was able to walk up the steps, because I've seen some other people where they collapsed at the end of a swim and they carried off on stretchers. And I was just thinking, I don't want that to happen. Do you know what I mean? Plus, I'm not the smallest of people. So I just remember walking up the steps thinking, it's done. And I had a really good recovery. One of my swim colleagues said to me, oh my gosh, Kath, I've never seen you shiver like that. And I was like, yeah, but you never seen me swim a mile in zero. So my recovery was really good. You know, we didn't have any fancy things. We had a shower in the little cabin that we had. So obviously you can't do hot showers. So the idea was we'll maybe do towels. They start off cold and get warmer. But to be honest, I said to the girls, I can't be bothered with that. I said, but you know, if you want to do it, can you wash my hair at the same time? They were like, you're just taking the mick. So my recovery, I think I had some really deep shivers, but within half an hour I went off for lunch and it was over. You know, that evening, you don't want to know what my bar bill was for that evening. You know, I loved everybody, loved the world, and probably chugged the ship out of gin that night. But I just couldn't believe it, actually. You know, I was relieved that I hadn't died, you know, because, you know, the surround yourself with positive people was the biggest thing that I took from a talk with Adam Walker. And there were so many people that told me, you know, I shouldn't be doing it. I've got 2 young children, blah, blah, blah. So that relief was just immense. The fact that I'd done it, you know, I'd had people sponsor me to go there, which that laid heavy on me, actually, you know, a little bit, because I was just Kath. Do you know what I mean? You know, I wasn't an athlete, you know, nobody. And it was a lot of money. And they, you know, they were putting faith in me that I could do it. So I just remember after that, obviously I had a very bad hangover the next day. But, actually, I've missed a bit. After the swim, we were allowed to go out on the little, the ribs, and we went on like an iceberg tour. And that was amazing because that was the first time that I'd really enjoyed Antarctica. It was like they were driving around and they were like, this iceberg looks like the Sydney Opera House. This iceberg looks like a swan. And that was probably the first time I took in the real beauty of Antarctica. other than when I was swimming and I couldn't believe the different colours of blue. So yeah, I was just really on a high. I just loved it. If I'd had the opportunity, I would have gone in the next day and done it. I couldn't get enough of ice swimming at the time. I just loved it.
And obviously it's quite a journey back from there, and you're navigating a pandemic as well. So I'm sure that wasn't smooth sailing. So that kind of week following it, and obviously not just the realization of what you've done, but the physiology stuff's dealt with. Your body's recovered, your hangover's gone, and you're heading across, back on the boat. Did you have that any, not necessarily pinch me moments, but were there moments on the way back of, oh my God, I've done it? But then also the reality, I've spoke to another person and be interested to find out if they were on the same boat randomly, that there was somebody who did an Antarctic trip that year and it took them I think a month or two to get home because the ports they were coming back through just wouldn't let them in because of all the COVID stuff. So they might have been on a later expedition, but it's, just talk us through that kind of month afterwards.
Yeah. So the journey back through the Drake Passage was horrendous. My colleague in my room, Catherine, actually got thrown out of her bunk, nearly landed in my bunk. It was, the Drake Passage was, it was scary. That was scary. We then had a few days in Buenos Aires on the way back in the sunshine. So that was lovely just to relax before coming back. Pinch me moments. I think I was quite sad actually I was excited as well because at that point I had sponsorship for the rest of the Ice Sevens challenge. So I had that to focus on. We were really lucky that we were the last boat that got back before the COVID restrictions. The last boat that got back in. So we got back no problems. Whereas 2 days later, there was people stuck on boats, people stuck in airports and everything. So we went straight into lockdown when we were back. And for us in Wales, that meant no swimming at all. And I don't know, I've missed a bit of a chunk out because obviously we're on, but I'll say because I'm over it now. So what happened with that record, there was a guy called Paul that was on there. And whilst I was in Buenos Aires, he had plastered all over Facebook that he was the first, he was the fastest, he was this, that, and the other. So I remember calling him and I was like, Paul, you were the fastest, but you didn't go first. And he said it was a translation error and this, that, and the other. And that really took it off the shine a little bit. It was just like, well, this isn't fair. And, I'm going to fight this. And Guinness World Records then and ISA was saying, we're not doing firsts in the ice anymore. And I was like, okay, I understand that, but there's a record for the most suddenly swim, which was a kilometre, and mine was a mile. So, it's further. So I won't go into the details, but anyway, after months of arguing, I did get a Guinness World Record then for the most suddenly ice swim 1 kilometre plus by a female or something like that. But, by the time I got it in the December, the BBC documentary had already gone out and it was a huge success in Wales. And what really made it for me was the people that hadn't been cold water swimming, that were, maybe like me, not your athlete, that thought, well, if Cath can do it, I'm going to have a go. And that really still now means the world to me because people were like just taken in by this ordinary woman, found something that she loves, went and did it. And, it's almost like, well, if Cath can do it, I'll do it. And I did go into quite a dark space then that summer. Now, I couldn't say whether it was, for me, I thought it was the coming down from such a big event, and then going straight into lockdown and, what's it to do anymore? I can't swim. I did put the pool in my garden, which was fine in the summer, but in the winter it was completely frozen. And then that's when I spent the summer making the new ice palace. And I was busy all day. I was furloughed for a couple of months, and then I was back working on the phone. So that kissed goodbye to doing all the gardening. But I was really down, and my joints were aching, and I really didn't know what was wrong with me. And I just kept blaming it on, I had nothing to train for, nothing to look forward to. But it turns out I'd hit the menopause, which I didn't discover till a year later. So it was bleak from the February to the December. And then when the Merthyr Mermaid went out, that really did lift my spirits for a couple of months, but I still couldn't swim. It was awful. And you've seen everybody else that lived within 5 miles swimming. And James had told me from the BBC, please don't, go and swim in or get caught, because I was working for the NHS for a start, and they were saying all about putting extra strain on the NHS. So I was like, right, so I can't do it for that reason, because, and then the Merthyr Mermaid was going out on Our Lives programme, which is the national BBC, in the July. So James was like, can you just not get into trouble? Don't do anything. So that winter was pretty much horrendous, because my garden pool was completely frozen all the time. It'd take you an hour to chip the ice off it. My freezer, the freezer of doom, I went in there every night from probably the December through to the March, because I was meant to be doing a swim in Russia in the May, I think, a Baikal swim. It was a relay. So I thought, well, I've got to keep acclimatized. So I sat in this freezer. But quite honestly, I went back when we were allowed to swim in the March or April, and I got in at 12 degrees and I lasted about 5 minutes. I was frozen. So I was like, well, that freezer didn't do much good. But that swim obviously never happened, and it's probably not going to happen now with the state of the world. But it took me some time to get the real Cath back, which was a combination of lockdown, coming back, what I had to go through, and then hitting the menopause. So it's something now that I look back on so fondly. I'm just like, I can't believe it was 5 years ago.
Do you know what's very humbling, but also just so nice to see? And it was probably 50 plus episodes ago. We interviewed an open water swimmer called Kerry-Anne Payne, who you may have come across on your travels. And Kerry-Anne talked about the happiest thing she took from her career was years afterwards having people come up to her and go, I was standing on the banks at the London Olympics, and it was because you were swimming, not because of where you came or how fast you were going. I have taken up or tried open water swimming. And she said, as a parent now, and as somebody who's forging, life post sport years in her kind of career, she said that means so much to her. So it's just lovely to hear that. And I have no doubt, knowing how strong and passionate the aquatics community are in Wales, how nice that must be to have people say that to you. And I'm sure that's now spawned more friendships, more conversations, especially, pandemic behind us, more events and face-to-face get-togethers where you go, I'm only here because of swimming.
Yeah, it's true. I know Kerry-Anne Payne. She's lovely. I met her through some sponsorship work that I did with Zogs about Find Your Open Water Swim Tribe. But yeah, it does mean the world. And, I've encouraged so many fast swimmers to go into the ice. I'm just like, there's medals to be had here. And, my one friend, Sian in particular, she's like a machine when we swim. She just kind of laps me, and she's doing it now. And she said to me, I wish I'd listened to you years ago, Cath. And I was like, yeah. And I won't do any competitions now. There's absolutely no point. It's like, if it's a friendly one, there's lots of friendly ones out there, but if it's actually to race and get a time, there's no point. I mean, it's like, let's be honest, I'm going to come probably last, so I'm not going to do that. But I think ice swimming is something that I'm always going to do because I love it. This winter, I've swum with a friend, Catherine, who I blame as well for getting me into this, because she gave me a stack of magazines, triathlon magazines, and H2 Open back all those years ago in 2015. She'd put on our triathlon group, does anybody want these magazines? I was like, oh yeah, I'll have a look through them. And it was on the back of that H2 Open, which is now the Outdoor Swimmer, that I seen this advert for the Chill Swim. And now, Catherine's been doing this for 7 years, and we do lovely things together. We did our first 2 kilometre swim in the river last night because it's warmed up. It was like, right, that's it, we're going to the rapids. Yeah, the swim community. So the last sort of 5 years has been a bit of navigate. The first 3 years of navigating this menopause stuff was pretty rubbish. And last year I had a bit of a blip, which I refer to as my menopausal mayhems. But to be honest, I've been really well. And, I think I'm back to myself. I've got some niggling injuries. But I think without the swim community, I was saying to you earlier that I now swim in the pool 2 times a week, which, you know, a couple of years ago, I'm like, oh, you won't get me back in the pool for love or money. And I swim with an adult squad called Stratega Torpedoes. And they're wonderful. I did that just to keep me social and just keep me ticking over, doing some sort of exercise. And it's actually improved my swimming so much because it's like going back to being a child and doing, like, what do you call it, squad training, you know, they do all stroke. Back crawl is like a nightmare. It's like I could see the lifeguard twitching, you know, when I'm doing back crawl. But I'm trying to learn how to do butterfly. So I've just got new things that I love, you know, and I took up free diving. Unfortunately, I haven't been able to practice that for a while just because it was a bit far away. But that brought another thing. It brought me in contact with Louise Minchin from the BBC, who I met through swimming with Her Spirit, which is a ladies' organisation that encourages ladies to exercise more. They do events and they do online stuff. So through that, I met Louise. We kind of hit it off and did the Abu Dhabi swim together. I said to her, can you get me a coffee by the time I come in? And then she contacted me a year or so later and said, Kath, are you doing any ice swims? Because I'm going to write a book called Fearless, and it's going to be about extraordinary women doing, ordinary women doing extraordinary things. I always get them the wrong way around. So she wrote this book. There's 17 chapters in there. There's some amazing women. You know, you talk about people going to Antarctica. I met a lady called Molly Hughes that's in the book. She was actually in Antarctica the same time I was, but she was trekking it solo to the South Pole. And she was the youngest person to have summited Everest from both sides. Amazing, amazing people. Lucy Gossage is in there. Caroline Bramwell, Christine Grossart, who's a cave diver. There's just so many amazing people in this book that I would never have known about if Louise hadn't put this book together. And she is nails, that lady. She did all the challenges. She cycled across Argentina. She went cave diving. With me, guess what we did? We didn't go ice swimming because I didn't have any. I had learned to free dive at the end of lockdown because it was a good excuse to get out of Wales, because they convinced me it was educational so I could travel for it after seeing my octopus teacher. Now, when I was a little kid, I could only swim underwater. You know, those kids that they swim underwater and then they pop up and that's what I'm like in the river, really. I'm just like, in the summer, I'm like, underwater, pop up, underwater, pop up. So I decided after watching my octopus teacher that I would love to be that free under the water. So I did the free diving course. Then for my 50th, 3 years ago, fell in love. I always fall in love with these idols. Got Jamie Monaghan. And then my mermaid idol is a lady, Mischief Mermaid, she's known as. And I went and did a mermaid course down in Cornwall. So I was a bit obsessed with freediving and mermaiding. So when Louise contacted me, I said, well, actually, for my 50th, I'm going to Finland to go freediving under the ice with 2 people that I'd gone to Antarctica with, Dee and Claire. And she was like, what do you need to do? And I said, first you need to learn to free dive and then we'll go. So she did this crash course on free diving. So I'm chapter 3 in her book, Fearless. And we went off free diving to Finland under the ice. It was the most scariest thing I'd ever done because our first dive was in the dark. It was bonkers. But I'm yet to try it twice. I say to everybody, try something twice and then you really know. So I've done bungee jumping twice. I hated it. I did my ice swimming twice. Loved it. The ice free diving, I was just broke when it came to go for the second year. So that's still on my radar to go back and do that for a second time and actually find out if I did really like it. I did have fun in the daylight, but is it something that I want to pursue? Like Clear at the moment. I don't know. Have you seen the film? It's called Breathe or Breath. It's with Joanna Norblad who swims under the ice.
Yes.
Yeah. So Claire Ryan from Ireland, she's got an Irish record. I think she's done 60 meters under the ice. And she's now trying to build on that all the time. I went to watch her in a freediving competition in Bristol a couple of weeks ago, and she said to me, Kath, do you fancy getting a Welsh record? I was like, no thanks. No thanks. I just want to play mermaids under the ice. No. So, you just meet so many amazing people. So that was nice. That was lovely. And Fearless just like opened up so many opportunities, and a number of us, keep in touch and try and do things together every now and again.
I definitely need to reach out to Louise because she's one of her first book, Dare to Try, is one of my big recommendations to sporting parents to understand the bigger picture of sport and see what else. It's not all done when you're 15. Actually, there's a whole life ahead of you. And certainly from an aquatics point of view, there's a much bigger thing than just sprinting one length of a swimming pool. There's loads of other pathways out there for people. So, that's awesome.
Yeah, Louise would be amazing because, of course, her story is she gave up swimming because she didn't like how she looked. And, she's always regretted that. And I think that and to get sort of equal pay for women was part of one of the main drivers why she wanted to bring this book out with all these like ladies in there. And Fearless, it's 17 different chapters. It's lovely. It's a beautiful book. I've read her Dare to Try as well. And she's now writing thrillers. She's just written Isolation Island is out there at the moment, and it's a really good book. And she's phenomenal. So we'll talk after. But we had such a fun time there. It was bonkers.
And I guess like the final thing is in terms of reflections, like obviously we connected at an event where you were reflecting on your experiences and sharing that inspiration with others. So now you've, perhaps a step further on from all of that kind of challenge that comes with both a pandemic, but also the finishing, if you like, of a huge goal and ambition. Now that you have told this story a number of times and you've had time to perhaps not necessarily put it in perspective, but just see it from just a little bit more zoomed out, what kind of reflections and takeaways have you looked back now and gone, that's given to me in my life, that's what that meant to me, and this is the life wisdom, if you like, that I can extract from that experience?
Yeah, the life wisdom that I get from it is remember why you did it. I loved it. I got very lost in that bit about fighting for a record, to the point of people were like, what's next for you? I almost felt like I needed to prove myself, and at one point I was going to go to the Arctic and I was going to get the highest swim as a female in the Arctic. And, I'd been approached by a couple of different film producers and documentary makers and stuff. And that's what we were going to do. The Arctic was going to be a thing. And then when it couldn't happen, I think it was not this year, the beginning of last year, I found out it couldn't happen. For me, it was actually relief because I actually didn't really want to do it that much anymore. I wanted to go, but I felt I've got nothing to prove. Do you know what I mean? I would much rather go to the Arctic and swim in a mermaid tail. Do you know what I mean? Or swim in a bobble hat, because going and getting a record was never the thing that I went for. I went because I knew about Lynn Cox, the first person to ever swim in Antarctica. Fell in love with Jamie. I absolutely love her. And it was, people said, did you train for it? Did you eat? And I was like, no, I just swam because I loved it. Do you know what I mean? I absolutely loved it. So now, 5 years on, I actually feel I'm back to how I was 5 years ago, where I was just doing something because I loved it. Do you know what I mean? Does that make sense? My heart, and I'm behind everybody that's competitive and wants to do stuff that's competitive. If people have got that talent to be competitive and get to the top of their game, yeah, you've got to go for it. You've got to do it. But I don't have that. Do you know what I mean? So for me, it's just like, don't get me wrong. If I had money, I'd love to go and do an altitude swim. Do you know what I mean? But now I'm like, well, when I do stuff, do I actually have to do a mile? What do I have to do anymore? I just have to do what makes me happy. So I want to go on a swim holiday. Do you know what I mean? Or I really would like to row the Atlantic in a team of 4 before I'm 60. That's something that I've really thought that would be a lovely goal. I went to a rowing club last year. It was hard. I'm large. I need to get smaller before I can do that. I couldn't get to the sessions. I'd like to free dive more. But that's difficult for me because I have to go all the way to Bristol or all the way to Pembroke. So I'm just chilling and just seeing what life brings. But I'll forever be grateful for that Antarctica trip. It seems like now when I look back, it was kind of like the peak of my ice swimming. Do you know what I mean? Because and anybody that's training for an ice mile out there, please don't take this wrong. I could just do an ice mile, get out, get dressed, have a cuppa and go home. That's where I was then. Now, oh my gosh, like Kath and I stood for 6 minutes in the river the other day going, "Ooh." So it's just like, I think I reached that goal doing something that I was absolutely loving without realizing that it was, I don't ever remember being at training. I don't know how I can explain that. But now I think if I had to train for a nice smile, I would find it really difficult.
I had a conversation very recently just about work and working in swimming. It's something that I don't work, and I try and explain that to people who perhaps have a job that's not necessarily as aligned to their pure, not necessarily values, but like as your experience, especially, swimming becomes a huge part of who you are. And I think working in it, although, there is hours associated and travel and a job to do to earn money, but ultimately it's like I'm doing something that is much more than an outcome. I'm not working towards a time or those sorts of things. And I think that's a lot of athletes talk about that when they go through, even, at the highest performing levels, that they get so sucked up in the pathway to whatever it is they're doing, they actually forget why they did it in the first place. And you see a lot of, athletes, take someone like Adam Peaty, who's recently announced that he's now going to aim for LA. He actually trying to find that balance and happiness and stuff instead of, it's just about the medals and the outcome, because I think it's quite a shallow way of finding satisfaction in any activity. And I think you've alluded to a lot of those experiences there. And my final question to pull all this to a close is, if we could time travel back to 2015, where you picked up that magazine for the first time, what would you say to yourself?
Exactly the same. Go for it. Why not? I just, no triathletes were swimming through the winter at that point, and I was just, swimming was the only bit of triathlon that I could really do. And I just remember seeing it and thinking, look at all those crazy people swimming. There was snow it was in Windermere, the picture, and they do like a little 25-meter pool in the harbour area. It's not called the harbour, but just outside. I can't remember the hotel there. And I just remember thinking, there's snow on the mountains and they're there. And I just thought, I want to try that. And I am just so glad I'm trying it. So it's always like, I think I would say to everybody, give something a go. Do you know what I mean? It's like, if you don't try it, you'll never know. Had I never tried that, I don't know, but it took my life in such a wonderful direction. I hardly took any pictures of Antarctica, but I'm always going to have that documentary that I can look back on. I forged so many lovely relationships. It was from that trip to Antarctica. I already knew Claire and Dee, but I wouldn't have gone to Finland ice free diving. I don't know. It's just, I love it. And I'm always going to swim. I think it's something that I've always done, throughout my life. The fact that I've gone back to the pool now, is funny. I mean, when I was first in that ice swim, and I was like, oh, pool, no pool, a wetsuit, no wetsuit. I still won't do an event if it's full wetsuit. If I go free diving, I have to. Now, the reason I won't do it is I can't swim comfortably in a wetsuit. I'm in completely the wrong position. But, now that I'm not ice swimming, to go into keepers, there's loads of crayfish in there. And it's just like, I'll put a pair of booties on now, quite happy. I'm like, I don't need to stand in that sludge anymore. Do you know what I mean? If I want to put something on, I can. Will I ever do any more ice miles? I don't think so, but who knows?
Well, Kath, it's been a long time coming. I've followed your journey now for a couple of years, and it's so wonderful just to sit and watch the documentary and work with a couple of open water and triathlon groups and shared it out straight away and said, guys, you've got to watch this, and immediately getting replies of, I've already seen it, it's so good. So I'm really looking forward to sharing our conversation with them. But yeah, Kath, a huge thank you for your time. It's been an absolute pleasure, and excited to see what path you forge next, even if that's not swimming miles of freezing cold water. I'm sure it's going to be something mermaid related. So yeah, a huge thank you for your time.
Is.
A huge thank you to Kath for joining us there today. An absolute pleasure sharing so many wonderful stories with her, from her early years of getting into swimming all the way through to what it was like crossing the finish line in Antarctica. But very, very humbling. And as I said, all the links will be in the notes. So check out below the links to all the things she's up to, the books we've discussed, and everything else. But it was a really, really great conversation today. I'm excited to see what comes next for Kath. Moving forwards, we've got lots of exciting episodes coming up soon. So make sure you hit subscribe, however you're joining us today. And I look forward to sharing another conversation with you very soon from the Rogue Monkey Podcast.